Civil society organizations are taking government to court over unfair regulations that govern the social relief of distress grant. They say the 350 rand grant deprives millions of people in need of government assistance and regresses developments of the right to social assistance for those who qualified for this assistance previously. Let's find out more now from Black Sash Director Rachel Bukasa, who joins us virtually from Cape Town. Rachel, thanks for your time this evening. Now, outside of yours and many other civil society organizations' ongoing campaign for the basic income grant, we'll talk about that a little later. At the core of this latest legal move is a means test that's now been put in place for this 350 rand social relief of distress grant. Now, this is a test, a means test that wasn't in place the first time round when this grant was first put in place, and now excludes many millions of South Africans who really need that money to at least keep some kind of food on the table. Talk to us about your reasoning behind this legal move.
So the reasoning essentially is to challenge the irrationality behind this means test. So essentially what the means test is saying is that if during the course of the month, you have the equivalent of 350 rand, so 10 rand here, 20 rand here, that equates to 350 rand for the month, you then are too rich essentially to qualify for the grant, and therefore you no longer qualify. The problem with this, of course, is that, as you know, people receive money from different sources. It doesn't have to necessarily be a job, for example. So, for example, we have many women who are receiving a child care grant, for example. So that money is more than 350. It will, of course, go into the adult woman's account because the child is a minor. And so as soon as it comes into that account, now that woman can no longer qualify for the SRD grant because now they essentially have more than 350 in their account. So that is one of the aspects that we're challenging, the rationality behind it, as well as the new application process that is digital.
And outside of it not making sense, it must also be difficult for government to be able to process or to keep an eye on. Already we've had issues with phantom South Africans being able to access this grant, and now this, and it must also add quite a bit of anxiety to many South Africans who are already worried about where their next a loaf of bread is going to come from. This just adds, don't you think, to government being seen by the poorest of the poor as an entity that's just trying to pull another fast one.
Of course, I mean, the poorest of the poor know that government uses them as a political prop when it's time for election, because the issue around phantom applicants and these people that are non-deserving, etc., that's not the poorest people's problems. That's government's problem. It's the inefficiency of their system that is allowing those kinds of things. If they have tighter systems that are actually where the corruption is not there and that when those kinds of things are addressed, the rest of the population should not have to suffer for it. And so it's not logical to want to make everyone suffer for the fact that your systems are not in place.
In terms of the legal advice you're getting, how confident are you of making headway with this action that you're taking to government?
Look, ultimately, in terms of what legally, we're not in a position to currently speak, but what we can say is this: we're not the only organization who feels that this process is really irrational and has resulted in many people suffering. What you essentially have is people who've been relying on this grant over the last 2 years, or who are suddenly not able to get the grant. And it's not that the economy has gotten to a place where these people can get jobs. So what happens to them? A responsible government should care about its people, and a responsible government should take care of them in this sense. And so to now disqualify people just irrationally because it just falls within your budget, that's not what a government that cares for its people does. And that's what I hope the courts will see that we're trying to bring across, is that this is to take care of people who are in dire situations, and we cannot look away.
Do you think that there's enough of an understanding in government as to how important it is to be able to get as many people as possible, even just a little bit above the poverty breadline, which I'm told, according to readings I've done, is to keep people above that line, you need 624 rand a month. So this grant only gives people about half of that. According to your research, what kind of impact could it have if we were able to ensure that the poorest of the poor are able to just get that 624 Rand per month?
You know, I think the question, the initial question being, is there an understanding? Yes, there's an understanding. But is there political will to change? No, there isn't. That's the issue here. Political will, where people were comfortable in our middle class spaces and we're not really in contact with what's happening on the ground. And as a result, we make policy decisions that affect people on the ground without really understanding the impact. For people, for example, who argue that 350 is not a big amount, yes, we agree. But on the ground, it's a life-changing difference. So in order to answer the question, well, actually, yes, there's an understanding, but just not the will to move it.
According to Stats South Africa, 18.3 million people are below that line. This latest move with the means test for the social relief of distress grant will give 350 Rand to 10.5 million. Already we know there was a delay in this latest round being given access, and there's talk that once this round runs out, which I think is around March next year, there's hope that we can finally then see the beginnings of a basic income grant. Is there any indication to you that that will indeed happen by the first half of next year?
Look, I'm not sure how how slowly the wheels turn, but I hope, seeing the dire straits that people are in, they would do it. So in terms of numbers, just for accuracy, there were 16 million people who applied for this grant initially when it came into being. The only reason we're talking about 10 million now is because they've gone and they've changed the system of application. And as a result, you've got about 5 million people who then have fallen through the cracks as a result of this process only being online and people struggling with that process. So initially the number is 16 million. The 10 million is what Treasury has then said that they can only allocate people grant amounts for. And so essentially that's what that is. So it's not a reflection of need. It's a reflection of the system that have been created by by government. And so essentially it's a bigger number than that.
And then just finally, this basic income grant that so many organizations like yours have been working on. We believe there were talks with the president earlier this year, and there's talk that at the end of this round of the social relief of distress grant next year, that we might see the beginnings of the basic income grant. Do you have any hope that that will indeed take place?
Look, I think we might get to a place of basic income, but not in that time frame. So for context, when we spoke with the president in January, part of the agreement of that process was that there'd be a process happening in the background where we'd make a proposal to him in June. It's June now, and nothing like that has happened. So none of those kinds of meetings we were talking about to be at a place to make a proposal in June has happened. So failure to do that then means that we're not going to be in a position where government is able to roll out something else at the end of March 2023. And so unless, there's a shift in political will and people sort of start to get going. So essentially the idea of a basic income grant, yes, the conversations are happening, and I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. The issue of timing, though, with government is something else completely different.
We should probably check when the next elections are. Perhaps that would help.
Absolutely.
That's a Black Sash director, Rachel Bukasa, joining us virtually there from Cape Town.